Hi folks, just a bit of an update on the whole Prince Andrew Jeffrey Epstein affair and also on the situation here in Australia. And you may wonder why I'm putting such a focus on the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing and sort of keeping it in the foreground the way I am. And it's because I think the bigger picture behind the Epstein affair is extremely important, and there's a real effort going on to cover this up. Recently, I've just been reading a book, a recently released book by a man called Dylan Howard called Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Tales. And I'm seeing a similar theme in this. It's quite a comprehensive book, and I would imagine that pretty well most of what is in the book, if not all of what is in the book, is true. Some of the connections that it reveals that Epstein had early in the game to Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, who we know was a Mossad agent. Things like this, some of the links that it's exposed to people such as Mohammed bin Salman, who was a very good friend of Jeffrey Epstein's, other people such as Adnan Khashoggi, who was an arms dealer, also with ties to Jeffrey Epstein. You might be aware of Adnan Khashoggi's relative, either his son or his cousin, I think it was Jamal Khashoggi, who was recently murdered in Saudi Arabia. So you see how all of this ties together. But there's a real effort to keep the focus on Epstein and keep the focus on the people that Epstein was blackmailing and his so-called co-conspirators on the Epstein level. They don't only look above the Epstein level. Like I said, there's a real effort to keep Epstein portrayed as the kingpin who was running blackmail operations, who was so open about his love for young teenage girls. He was quite open about it with people, and the claim is that this used to get people to let their guard down, and they would sort of confide in him that they didn't mind young teenage girls as well, and he'd be able to bring them into the fold that way. So there's a lot of effort to portray as, this is the type of situation that was happening. But you've got to understand, when you look at Epstein's ties to the mega group and how he went through his meteoric rise to fame. As I said, I think in the first report, he dropped out of college. Suddenly he was teaching at the Dalton School, teaching maths, physics, calculus at the Dalton School, which is a very prestigious school where very rich people send their kids. Through that, he was able to connect with Adam Greenberg and end up working with Bear Stearns. And he'd already been seen to have an attraction to young girls when he was working at the school. Inappropriate behaviour, a young teacher hanging around with the teenage girls, even going to student parties and hanging out with the girls there. So you've got to wonder why this guy was even invited into Bear Stearns. And we're told that it was because he was basically a mathematical genius. He had ways of doing things that nobody could do better. And so he was seen as this huge star and was just brought into the fold. In Bear Stearns, he reached partner within 4 years. He apparently left after 1 year and then came back again. But however he did it, he made partner of Bear Stearns within 4 years after starting on the floor. And it seems incongruous that this could have been really what happened. But it does suggest all this in the book that I've been reading, Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Tales. That was how he rose through the ranks, because he just had this way with people, and he just had this brilliant ability to be able to see figures and be able to make lots of money for people. But there's also talk through the book of people who tried to have conversations with him about this, and he'd always steer the conversation away. Once it got to kind of technical stuff about calculus and whatever, he would steer the conversation away to something else. And many of these people began to wonder whether he actually had the skills that had been attributed to him. And that's a bit of a telltale sign. They mention that in the book, but they don't really touch on it any further. But when you start looking at his connections to the mega group, you look at who the mega group really is, you begin to see that Jeffrey Epstein was groomed for this position, and he was running brownstone operations just to keep tabs on everybody. And it wasn't just to blackmail people so he could get money. It was so he could give the intelligence, give the information to intelligence sources, intelligence agencies all around the world, and they could use it to control people in high levels of office, academia, science, whatever. By doing this with people, getting people in these compromising positions, it doesn't matter what field you're working in. It could be politics, could be science, could be finance, could be, military, whatever. If you want to start a war with some country and nobody in the military or the political arena wants to start this war, all you have to do is compromise them and say, well, now you're going to vote this way or I'm going to expose this information. And not only that, you give this information to foreign governments, to Mossad, to the CIA, to the KGB, to everybody. And you've got to understand that they all work together. People have to stop seeing this as being separate countries. All these intelligence organizations work together because there is a much, much bigger picture going on here. But this is what we've seen anyway through this Epstein case. Another thing, I just saw a report in the Sun newspaper. I haven't been able to confirm it. It's in the Sun. You don't know. But it says a document has just been made public, which is a 10,000-page document, which was apparently locked and sealed after the first Epstein case, but apparently it's been made public. And it lists names of many co-conspirators. Some have been redacted, but some are not, and apparently this is out there as well. So again, this is giving the public something to get their teeth into because they want you looking there. They want you staying at the Epstein level, not looking at the mega group, not looking at the enormous child trafficking operation that is happening worldwide, and not ever considering the possibility that Jeffrey Epstein may not have been the only person with an island doing these sorts of things. It's very likely that there are many others. And it ties in dramatically and very deeply with the royal family as well, and with all royal families. When you look at Prince Andrew's connections to Epstein, he says he met him in 1999 and all this sort of stuff. There's a lot of indication that he very likely met him a lot earlier than that. There's every indication that Epstein was actually connected to Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father. There's every indication that Ghislaine Maxwell took over Robert Maxwell's Mossad operations and was continuing to run the whole thing that way as well. Ghislaine Maxwell, as I said last report, is key to this whole thing. And it's no wonder that she's in hiding because they basically need to hang her out to dry in order to, detract attention away from the mega group. Unless she can come across as saying, look, I didn't know and I was just, getting masseuses for him. And, there was all these other people that were doing it. They're the ones you want because they're the men. They're the ones who are molesting the women. This is the only hope that she's really got, which may explain why this 10,000-page document was just released, maybe to take a little bit of the heat off her, a little bit of the pressure off her. The fact that there's no international arrest warrant for her that's been issued speaks volumes, though. She's got very, very high-level connections, and this wasn't just about Epstein running his own little personal business. Now, of course, if he had all this stuff and all this money was being funneled to him by the mega group, and all of the businesses were simply a front for what he was doing, of course he's going to be having his other stuff that he's doing on the side. I mean, he's got all this spare time. He's just doing what he wants. He's got an unlimited supply of money. If you look at the Zorro Ranch, it talks about how he was going to bring in 20 girls, impregnate them, pay them $200,000 a month to live there and have these children, and he was going to take control of the children. He'd also built a realistic, state-of-the-art 1840 Western town there on the property, and seemed to be in the process of setting up something like his own Westworld, only using real people. And of course, this is one of the things that made Virginia Roberts run when he offered her $200,000 a month to live in this place and have a child for him. And she said, well, I want to go and complete my massage course first in Thailand. And he said, okay, no worries, bring me back a Thai girl. And that's when she took off. It was too much for her and she wanted to make a break, and she found the means to escape back then. And Virginia Roberts' story is actually quite believable. But we've had something like 80 women come forth now claiming Epstein molested them. We've had certainly more than Virginia Roberts claimed that Prince Andrew was involved as well, and claimed that Prince Andrew molested them. So we're going to see a lot more of this. But again, the focus is always going to be on Epstein as the ringleader, as this crazy billionaire who had all these weird dreams, was tying himself up with tech companies and Elon Musk and Mohammed bin Salman and all these people that he was involved with. So the focus is going to be on him because I don't want you to look at the bigger picture, which is this worldwide human trafficking network, child trafficking network, the enormous amount of child abuse that goes on behind the scenes that, many governments and the royals are involved in. As I said on the first report, I mean, you couldn't go into Epstein's house and not know what was going in there. So what was Paul Keating's daughter doing, even visiting him as well? Apparently in Epstein's house he had, on the second floor, he had a chess set as well, which was made up of famous people that he knew. Life-size chess set with these statues of famous people that he knew that were the pieces. You can imagine how creepy this place really was. But there's a lot bigger picture to all of this, folks, and that's why I'm keeping some focus on this, because I think it's very, very important. And you can see the way they're playing it, why they're exposing all these names and all this stuff, and where they want to lead public attention. And I doubt that we will ever get any type of real trial in this whole Epstein case. I doubt that people will ever be told the truth by mainstream sources. I think they're going to have to look at it themselves, and in order to see it, they're going to have to really step back and look at the bigger picture. And I think it's important that we keep some focus on it, and I'll bring you some more information on this as soon as some comes to hand. In regard to the situation here in Australia, excuse me, we are just burning to the ground over here, folks. There's something like 140 fires that are still raging in Australia. The government is still withholding water. They're selling water. The environmental minister has just signed over 12.5 billion litres of water to Adani or something like that, some foreign company. China is still damming our rivers and taking water for fracking. The Prime Minister has rejected calls for more aid to firefighters, more assistance for firefighters. They're really burning us out, folks. They really are. And all the creeks in the area where I lived have stopped flowing. And I've lived in this area for 52 years. I've never seen these creeks stop flowing. Now, all of these creeks are spring-fed, so it doesn't matter if there's rain. These creeks come from aquifers deep in the mountains. And what we're finding is that all of the creeks in the area where I live, the border ranges here between Queensland and New South Wales, near the coastal region there, they're all drying up. All of the waters on both sides of the range, on the New South Wales side of the range and on the Queensland side of the range, have all stopped flowing. And as I said, this is not due to a lack of rain. These creeks are all spring-fed. They should never stop flowing. This is due to deliberate mismanagement, possibly even due to some of the fracking operations that have been going on in the centre of the country. Next week on the show, I'll bring you a few shots of what's actually going on here in the country, some of the enormous gas wells and stuff we've got going on in this country that you can actually see from Google Earth. And I want to bring you a talk about history as well. I'm actually going to be discussing a lot of history and a lot of what is going on in this country in my talk tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, which is happening here on the Gold Coast. Again, if you're near the Gold Coast or anywhere near the area, please do come along to that. You'll find a link below to a talk I'm giving called Vision 2020 or 2020 Vision, which is being held in Varsity Lakes on December the 14th. Do come along to that if you're able to. But we are really suffering at the moment in this country, folks. The creeks and rivers have stopped flowing, and the country is pretty much on fire, most of the East Coast anyway. People in Sydney have been saying, that they've just been smoky for 2 months. They don't want to go outside. The air has just been full of smoke for 2 months. They're getting lung damage. They're getting respiratory problems. A friend of mine in Sydney said, well, this is it, Australia. It's over. I'm leaving. I'm going to go and move somewhere else because it's over for this country. That's what a lot of people are feeling. And when you really look at the history of this country and the history that's been hidden from us, there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. There's some really, really deeper things going on in this country than what people would ever imagine. So I'll talk to you about that a little bit next week. As I said, I'm going to bring you a radio show next week. I can't bring you one this week because I'm doing a talk this weekend, but I do intend to bring you a show next week. It will very likely be focused mainly on history, but there's a lot of stuff that I want to share. I'm not going to kind of drop off the radio just yet. There's a lot of stuff I do wish to share with you before I take a break. I do think it would be a good idea for me to take a break though, folks, because I want to work on some films. I think things are getting pretty desperate and we need to start paying attention to things on the ground, and You know, I'll do the radio shows as long as I think it's necessary for me to do them, and as long as it's making a difference. But I just want to focus on what is going to make the most difference. And I think it's important to put a little bit of focus on what is happening in our own communities, and that's what I intend to do here in Australia. Even with the talk that I'm going to give this weekend, you know, I'm not going to go and like give a presentation. I just want to talk to people, show them what's going on, have a conversation with my countrymen, and help them see the bigger picture for what it is. Because everything that we're looking at, you know, this whole Epstein thing, the human trafficking, the fires here in Australia, the depopulation, you know, what the purpose of all of these wars is all about, you know, it's all linked, it's all connected, it's all ultimately about the same thing. And I think it's important that people get a bit of focus on it, folks. So I will bring you a show next week, and as I said, it will be mainly on history, and I will bring you more information regarding this Epstein case as it comes to hand. As I said, it's important to keep a focus on this as well, because it's exposing the bigger picture. It's a real crack in the shell, and they are desperately attempting to control the narrative. They want to push it to page 3. They want to put the focus on the smaller players, the people that were being blackmailed, the people that were willingly involved and were unwillingly involved. But they don't want you to look at the bigger picture of how the operation was actually being run, who it was really being run by, you know, who Epstein is actually the fall guy for. Because, you know, just the fact that, you know, he was given this house by Les Wexner and all the stuff that we're told. I mean, Les Wexner's a pretty shrewd businessman. There's no way he is going to have been duped by someone like Jeffrey Epstein, and there's no way that people were, you know, involved in as much as they were. People like Les Wexner, people like, you know, Prince Andrew, people like, you know, Alan Dershowitz, all of these people. There's no way they were involved with him as much as they were without knowing what is going on. So it's important to keep a focus on it, folks. It's important to look at the bigger picture. But anyway, that's it for me now. I will bring a report to you probably next week, and I'll bring a show to you again next week. Again, if you are in the area of the Gold Coast, please do come along to the talk day after tomorrow, December the 14th at Varsity Lakes. Again, you'll find a link below, or you can find one at my website, thecrowhouse.com. And I look forward to seeing you there, and I'll speak to you again soon. In Lakesh.